Just right.
We can how's he? Start the meeting.
Wow.
Hey.
All right.
15.
All right, let's do a call.
When are we going to do the Pledge of Allegiance? Oh, roll call first.
Wilson,
Here.
Voorhees,
Yo.
Coe, here, Godus,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Stepp. Yes. Hershey.
Present.
Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, are there any agenda changes that anybody has? Are there any agenda changes that anybody has? No? Okay. Any conflicts of interest? That would be the seating.
No, when that come up, when that item comes up.
Or what are we talking about now?
Make a motion.
No? Okay. Any conflicts of interest?
I have none.
No, thank you.
I have no conflicts.
Okay.
Well, I went last meeting, but not this meeting.
All right. Does anybody, citizens appearing before council, these are for items not on the agenda. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Come up, give your name, address, anything. Please.
Good evening. My name is David Rippey. I live at 4 Mile and I own property on South Midland Avenue. First of all, I'd like to commend you guys for installing that little chat and chew thing in the mornings. I attended that this morning. That's really helpful. You get a one-on-one with or at least a real small amount of people talking to the counselors. But I'm here to talk about Midland Avenue, and I spoke on it previously. First of all, I appreciate all the hard work everybody's put in on it, and it definitely needs done. I'm just concerned, and so are almost without exception everyone I talk to about the scope of the project. It seems to the people I've talked to and myself that there's a lot of money being spent to provide a third pedestrian access from basically the Mountain Market to the 27th Street Bridge. You already have the bike path, pedestrian path down along Atkinson Trail. By going an extra 400 feet across the Cardiff Bridge, you can access South Grand Avenue and walk that. In order to accomplish that, I've looked at the plans online, and in order to accomplish that sidewalk, you're basically installing a lot of retaining wall, basically retaining wall along that whole eastern edge of Midland Avenue. I just think that if you do bid it that way, you should at least bid it with an alternate to exclude that. It may entail not having two-way traffic the whole time, but I rebuilt Midland Avenue from 4 Mile from Midland up to the entrance to 4 Mile Ranch 10 years ago, with just stoplights, temporary stoplights. So, and that works for two-way traffic or one-way traffic, but you're only stopped temporarily. Creating a platform that wide is doggone expensive. And talking with people that live in Park West, everybody there is questioning it. I mean, there's a lot of questioning going on as far as to why that sidewalk's going in. So, that being said, the project, it needs a new road platform, it needs a new road, it needs utilities. It's just, I don't know why we need 3 pedestrian access points to go from the Mount Market to the 27th Street Bridge. And that's all. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
I guess I'll say, just in response to that, not quite everyone at Park West feels that way. All right, any other public comment? All right, we'll bring it back for council comments. Paula.
I just wanted to kind of update people a bit on Craig Jung. He was a former city council person, and he went through an illness that put him in the hospital in Denver for 25, 30 days, something like that, and ended up at Heritage Park, where he is recuperating well, and I'm happy to say from some of the things that I'm reading that he may even be home this week, still recuperating, but just really excited that this community member who's added a lot to our community is coming back.
That's great. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah.
Charlie.
Several things. Last year, when we approved the reopening of 7th Street, we talked about having a discussion this spring about closing it on the weekends during the May 1st, roughly, to late September, mid-October. And I don't want to get that lost. And as Steve pointed out in an earlier work session, that even though it's really cold out there and we got lots of snow, spring is not that far away, nor is May 1st. And I want to know if council's direction is still to look at closing that on the weekends during the primary tourist season. But that's one thing. So if there's any feedback on that or just want me to go on, I got other issues, but.
I think we did talk about that pretty extensively, about whether we wanted to do it. So I think it's worth probably an agenda item conversation on the dais about whether we want to pursue that.
So since we're going to cancel that second meeting in March here a little bit later, I think we should put that on the first meeting in April. Okay.
Agreed.
All right, thanks.
Do you guys want that on the evening agenda or a work session?
You would just need direction, not really a motion, so.
I like votes sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep it on the evening then.
Second thing I have is, most of you know, I spent last Thursday and Friday in Denver at the Colorado Municipal League Legislative Conference, which was very helpful in understanding the legislation pending. I will get you a written summary. I've not been able to finish it. I've had a number of other things happen this week. I was unable to finish the summary. I'll try to get that up by the weekend, Deborah, and then she can distribute the summary of kind of what was out there in the bills. And the one bill I did want to talk about, however, and then Friday, we had the actual legislative council where we vote as a CML body to if we're going to support or not support certain bills, and that'll be in the summary I give you. There's some interesting stuff there for us. There is a bill pending, and I don't remember the number of it, that proposes to prohibit any local government from banning camping within their municipal limits. That is set for a hearing on February 26th. I spoke to Megan Dollar, who is the chief lobbyist for the CML, and asked her if support from Western Slope community opposing that would be something desirable, and she thought that would be helpful. didn't know if Debbie Wild might be able to go down and do that. I have to be in Pueblo on Monday. This is on Tuesday. I could go if you felt that was something that we wanted to oppose. I will tell you that Megan's view was it's probably not going to go anywhere. It's probably not going to get out of committee. But it might be a good way to get a little political push out of it. But since we had a travel conversation, I thought I ought to bring that up because it would require me to stay in Denver on the city one night. But I'd be happy to stay and testify against that if there was any sense of the council they wanted to take that position. Or if you feel well, if it's going to die anyway, there's no need for us to go. And I'm okay either way. I think there's some political capital sometimes to get in going down and supporting CBL positions on things, but that's up to the council.
Thoughts from our council members?
Can we write a letter, or do you think
Sure.
you'd rather be there?
Personal testimony, I mean, whenever you look at those things, it's always better than letters, but Carl probably has better sense of that than I do, but
I think if you're going to be down there anyway, I think personal testimony is the most impactful. I think that's really is. Just like for you guys, think about the testimony of an affected resident versus a letter from that same affected resident. It just carries more emotional impact if you're there.
And I do imagine it is an issue you care about.
I would actually say that there's some things that are not travel or training issues and should not be necessarily subjective to our budget in that regards, because this council as a body has said, we've taken an ordinance about camping. And so I think that if we want to support that, then this is the cost of supporting that ordinance. And I don't know where that cost comes out of necessarily, but I don't know that we should be digging that. I'd be supportive of you going and having the city pay for a hotel.
okay, if that's the position, then I'll try to work with Deborah and Debbie Wild if I can and make sure I got a good position statement for me to read. And Carl, obviously, I'd like your input on that. And I am going to be leaving Monday by about 2 o'clock to go to a meeting I have in Pueblo. So, I'm sorry, this is on Wednesday. I'm in Pueblo on Tuesday. So, okay, thank you. Oh, one other thing, I'm sorry, I apologize. You wouldn't let me talk earlier, so. Carl, at the last meeting, I brought up the concept on the camping area in that ordinance. I don't know if Anna mentioned it to you, that we expand that area and basically cover everything from, I think it was 9th Street, I don't have the map in front of me, to the river as being a camping ban, so that people can't camp in city grounds out here or maybe down in the old sewer.
Take a look at that. There were a lot of reasons why we kind of stopped things where we did, and I kind of need to get back to my research on why we were where we were at.
We were mostly, as I recall, Carl, doing the smoking. We didn't want to go beyond Cooper or Colorado, excuse me.
It has to do with how close and how proximate there is a place of rest, which is the kind of legal concept
Right.
that's come up in case law recently.
I'm aware of that, yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I want to be careful.
Okay, because
Take a look. And
I think there was a general consensus that if we could expand that area, we should do that.
Okay.
And if we can, we can do it on second reading, I'm assuming, so.
yeah, like I said, I think what I want to be careful about is not making it something that's easy. Right now you can go to a place of rest within a couple of blocks of downtown. If we make that a mile, that makes it a lot easier to
Okay.
challenge. That's my only concern, and I'll take a look at it though and come back on Saturday.
All right. Now I'm done, thank you.
Thank you. Shelley?
Okay, so my first comment kind of ties up in with yours, Charlie, on 7th Street and talking about opening up that. I just had a comment on the New Year's Eve event, which was, I think, a fantastic success. I had a lot of good comments on that. People loved it. The only downside, and there was a letter in the paper, I don't know if there was more than one, but talking about the fencing that was used. And I don't know why that fencing was there. I think maybe that's something we can talk about more on
Drinking,
council.
wasn't it?
Alcohol.
But other towns have events where there's drinking and, you can close off access points. I just feel like we need to create a much more opening and welcoming environment. That fencing gave a very negative environment to that event. So I'd like to just somehow get some assurance that we don't have more fencing when we're closing off 7th Street. I don't feel like we didn't build that plaza and that underbridge area to fence it off and give the wrong impression. So we
Do, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, I do think that was one of the things Pat wanted to look at. I think there has to be some fencing. I don't know if it needs to be that fencing. I think it was one of the things Pat wanted to look at.
I know when they've done this up in Carbondale, they have access with just cement barriers and volunteers checking people
Well,
coming and
right.
going, and
I think there's a way we can do that that doesn't feel like we're creating a negative environment. So just, we can have that discussion at a later date, but I would like to have council talk about assurance that we don't have more fencing like that at events. So, the next thing I had is the CMC Sustainability Conference that Paula brought up. And I saw that too. They have a call for presentations. So I was thinking it would be great if the city could do a presentation. I am happy to help put that together and even be there and make that presentation. I realize staff has a lot on their plate right now. So just wanted to get council's thoughts on that. I could work with staff on things that we have in place now, things that we've done, that we have going on at this point, and things that we're kind of looking to the future, and then just put a slide set together to offer at that conference. This is the first conference that I know that's at Spring Valley, so it's local, it's close for us, and I think the city can, it's a great time for the city to kind of tout the things that we have going on and show the rest of the valley what we're doing, and the state.
I think that'd be a good idea.
I agree.
Anybody have a problem with that?
I think it's great.
Okay?
I'm good, and I've been talking with Shelley about this. I just want you all to be careful as we go further down the sustainability road, that you consider we don't have any staff member dedicated to sustainability measures. So just bear that in mind. We love it. We would love to do it, but I don't want to take us too far down a road we cannot do. That is separate from the presentation, but I just want to remind you guys, if maybe it's something you want to look at in the 2021 budget.
Okay.
If City Council wants to do
Councilor Davis.
significant sustainability, then yes.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say in regards to the New Year's festivities, I completely agree with Shelley, and I think there's a number of us on council that would really like to give some feedback and some input before we actually get to final design of the next major event like that. That's it.
If I could just, Pat talked about that at a meeting I was at and gave a report, and I can't remember which meeting I was at. And I think he's looking at other fencing, just so you know. He realizes that didn't work well.
I'm sure that's the case as well. I just think that it
Sorry.
really is a reflection of this community, and we're responsible for that, so
It was a great event, but
it was.
I think it just depends on how far you guys want to focus on day-to-day operations, but yes,
Not
we'd
to
be
a great
happy.
degree, but we'd like to at least have the opportunity to comment.
What's the deal, Jen, with, at one time we were talking about having, you know what I'm talking about?
An entertainment district.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
We have put everything that we need to in place to make it available, and Matt and I have talked about the idea of having a couple of events down there, and then it will kind of create the buzz, and people will want to do the piece that the businesses have to do. So we may be getting closer to that. I do know that we are working on Kentucky Derby showing in the Bethel Plaza area, and I know that Pat is looking at fencing options related to that. The liquor license, I think, in that case would be KC Brewing extending their, hopefully, they have to go through the process, but extending their license premise into the Underbridge area.
Cool. So we'll have something at some point on,
The entertainment district requires there to be a board with membership from all of the varying participating businesses. So there's a piece that I think we'll get there kind of naturally, and Pat and I have been thinking about how to do that.
Do you think maybe that'd be this year?
I would hope so, but if not, maybe it's the next year. But I do think a few more events people will want, there'll be this natural, why can't I get a beer from one of these businesses and go into this common consumption area? And we'll say, it's possible, but there are these steps that you have to go through. And I haven't had a chance to talk to the police chief about it, so obviously we'll need his buy-in as well.
He seems great with it.
I just like to say, there's already a lot of that conversation, Jen, and there's already a lot of that conversation that it gets thrown at me constantly.
And I've been talking to
I never
Casey.
know what to say. I'm always just like, I don't know anything.
I've been talking to Casey Brewing about it a little bit. I think Pat and I can go back and sort of think about how that conversation can move forward. So we will certainly try to, and obviously we put the regulations in place because we thought that there would be a point at which people would want it.
Right.
Yes, the answer is yes. We'll work on it.
Thanks. I just have a couple comment statements. One, I think on the sustainability, we just need to be careful. I know we're really excited about doing stuff, and I think there's strong will on council and staff and the public to see us take a lead on that. But I do want to, I guess, echo Deborah's concerns. I mean, yes, we clean up all our plates now. The first actual initiative we do, we clean up plates, but now, we're struggling in, we're down 50% of our clerk's department, and so someone still has to unload that dishwasher. I know that's just a microcosm, and that's kind of a small thing, but, and this has nothing to do with your thing. But, as we're talking about rolling these programs out or doing things that are greater, I think, we are so short-staffed in so many areas of this city right now that to put incremental things on people's plate is fine. We just have to know what that cost is. And so I don't know if it is increased capacity throughout our departments or a sustainability coordinator, but I think we should have that conversation, and not just about sustainability, but about any extra work of things that we're passionate about. Because I think I'm probably the worst person up here. So the other thing I just want to say, Jen, you're my favorite person tonight, apparently. But if the rest of council doesn't care about this, that's fine. It's not a big deal. But I personally don't like the Las Vegas style signs that are super bright LED. There's a new one at the New Mexican restaurant on Grand Avenue, the New Mexican. Frida's, yes.
Very good.
The sign
Restaurant.
or the food?
But the food is excellent.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Have to try it.
You should.
Okay.
But you mean but by Vegas style signing it, like they had a Valentine's Day, I was there.
It's very bright.
And
And
it
LED.
shines and it changes.
Well, it doesn't change. So it doesn't change anymore. It did, but that's a violation of our current sign code. I'm seeing if there's any desire to have a conversation about whether those kind of signage. There's another one at I think Grease Monkey, that's like that. And a couple in the community is probably not big a deal. We could probably talk about grandfathering them. I just don't want to see those kind of really bright, visually gaudy signs, is how I view them. But if no one else views them that way,
No,
maybe I'm just a boomer.
I'm completely behind it, and if we need to change the sign code, I'd be for that, because they're popping up in different locations, and, it doesn't fit.
Maybe we should direct the planning commission to take a look at that.
Yeah, if there's support up here for that.
I like them.
Carl, that's not a First Amendment issue, that's a community standard issue, isn't that not correct? Never mind, we'll have planning commission take a look at
I was just thinking it would hate me, but,
it. Well, that has nothing to do with the sign code.
we'll take a look at it.
Okay.
50 years.
All right, is there any other comments? All right, consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
I vote for the approval of consent agenda.
It's been moved by Charlie, seconded by, is that you, Rick?
Yes, we're
Okay.
yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item, number 10, planning item 1610, major development permit amendment for Iron Mountain Hot Springs to extend a parking lot paving deadline.
The land baron wants more parking.
Go figure.
When will that joke get old? Never, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Hannah Klausman with Community Development. Let's start this slideshow here. Presenting Planning Item 1618, which is a major development amendment for Iron Mountain Hot Springs. And just so we're all familiar with the site that we're talking about, as Iron Mountain has quite a lot going on in the city, we're talking about the main Iron Mountain Hot Spring pool location and its parking lot, which is thinly outlined there in blue on the picture here, off of Centennial Street at 281 Centennial Street here in Glenwood. The action item before you is a major development permit amendment. Consideration of an amendment to a development permit to extend the requirement to provide impervious surface in the parking area and from permanently striping parking spaces until June of 2021. Planning and Zoning Commission heard this at their regular meeting in January and are recommending approval with suggested findings included on page 6 of the Planning and Zoning staff report as well as in the City Council staff report. So a little bit of background on this item. The major development amendment was approved by City Council in October of 2014. They were granted a design variance that basically allowed them 4 years' time to pave the parking area, or at the time that the vacant parcels that are adjacent to the property developed. So that date would have been October 16th of 2018. Those vacant parcels had also not developed at that time. So Iron Mountain Hot Springs did come back into the planning department to get the process for an extension started before that deadline did expire, and has been working with Planning and Zoning Commission over the course of several meetings to address this. So this is the final approval of this request for the major development permit amendment, which City Council has approving authority over. So I did want to mention, and I covered this in the Planning and Zoning staff report, but the intent of this variance that was granted was really to defer and allow the applicant time to figure out what their development plan was. And as I'm sure many of you know, a lot has happened over there since 2014. The configuration of the parking plan has changed, and we do now have an approved development plan for one of the vacant parcels, the new Caverns Village building, which was approved with Planning and Zoning Commission, and which I sent you the notice of decision on a little bit ago. So with that application, the applicant has actually figured out a more permanent layout for their parking. And so they did not want to have to tear up a paved parking lot when this other development did come in down the road to reconfigure it. So the applicant statement does point out several of the projects that they were working on in the meantime. This project, Caverns Village, as well as the moving of one of our lift stations, which they're working on with the city as well. So just a couple of items and some background on the intent of why this variance was granted in the first place and why the applicant is now extending the timeline to coincide with the building of the Caverns Village building to June of 2021 is when they're expecting that all to be finished. This is just the section of our code that requires parking lot areas to be paved. I included two images in the staff report as well as in this presentation to show you the approved parking site plan from 2014. So this was that goes along with the approval of the major development permit, and it includes 90 parking spaces, which you see in this image here. And then this is what the current parking layout looks like today. So we do have some additional parking area that's kind of naturally grown. This particular extension is only requiring the 90 approved spaces as part of this extension, and staff has included language that the applicant will turn in a plan for this extended parking area prior to the end of this year, so December 31st of 2020, and at that time we'll lay out their paving requirements as well. Staff went through the review criteria here and is more laid out in the staff report. Staff found that two of the criteria were met and two of the criteria actually are not applicable here. So the site and architectural plan is consistent with the general purpose and intent of this code. Staff did find under the intent language that staff believe the current state of the Iron Mountain Hot Springs parking lot does not significantly impact the intent or purpose of the code. Item B, the site and architectural plan is consistent with dimensional design, development, and all other standards of the code. This actually would not apply in this case because it is a variance, and a variance by its nature goes against aspects of the code. So this item B is not applicable. C, the site and architectural plan is consistent with any previously approved plat, PUD, or any other precedent land use approval. So this actually extends from an approval from the major development permit from 2014, so staff does believe this is consistent with that plan. It is just extending the deadline that was put into that agreement. And the comprehensive plan does not specifically go into pavement, so staff did not include an analysis of that criteria. Your action alternatives tonight, you can approve with conditions, deny the permit, or continue the hearing and request additional information if you so desire. So the action item before you, to reiterate, is consideration of an amendment of a major development permit for Iron Mountain Hot Springs to extend the requirement to provide an impervious surface until June of 2021. With these suggested findings, and staff has included the conditions as I've mentioned, that the applicant shall submit an application for parking lot expansion areas not included in the original 90 spaces that were approved in 2014 by December 31st of 2020. The application will be processed at the appropriate planning review step as determined by the director. Expanded parking areas will be subject to all code requirements at time of submittal. And the second condition, no parking areas outside of the original 90 spaces shall be paved or otherwise altered until a parking lot expansion application is reviewed and approved per condition 1. And that is all I have for you. Thank you.
Questions for staff? Shelley? Oh, no, you weren't. Charlie got in ahead of you.
So, can you show me, and I thought I saw it, and then when you were showing the slides here, I didn't see it. Can you show me because I thought the parking was going to move and be near I-70 with the new development. Do I remember that right, or did I read something wrong?
So for this major development permit, we're only talking about those parking areas associated with the hot springs, and the new development is directionally challenged with this lot in particular. You're right, that way. There's parking that goes around the new building. Some of it is closer to I-70, yes.
So this parking isn't moving anywhere?
No, there is, it's not moving, just kind of the entrances and some additional landscaping is what's planned.
Is there anything you can show me where the new building's gonna go that was just approved?
Yes, I could do that. Maybe. This is a big application. So, pardon my scrolling.
No, I'm getting most of it.
I get motion signature.
Yeah. Look away from your screens for just a moment while I get there.
It's like 1982 font.
Was there a specific location question, or you just wanted to kind of see
Just
the
trying to get
whole?
a perspective of the parking
Yes.
area that we're extending versus the new development.
So this is kind of a complicated plan, but it shows the connection of Iron Mountain Hot Springs Parking B, as it's identified here, is the new parking area. And then Iron Mountain Hot Springs Parking A is what we're possibly extending the parking lot pavement area for. So you can see the new building is here, and the parking area goes around that building against I-70, and then borders with the CDOT maintenance facility yard.
Thank you. That's right. I was trying to remember that from what I read.
Yes, it's hard to conceptualize without the
That's all
whole
I have. Thank
picture.
you.
Shelley?
Hannah, I just had a couple questions. Does this variance at all affect the parking lot landscape requirements? And I mean, were they also put off kind of as part of the variance, or?
So those aspects, they were also granted parking lot landscaping variances that
Okay.
were approved, which apply to this 90-space area.
Okay.
And that's why staff's condition specifically states the new area that has not been approved, part of the required parking lot expansion, that's going to be subject to code at that time that it comes in. So the landscape variances that were granted and any other parking lot variances that are granted only apply to this small section from the original Hot Springs development, and Iron Mountain Hot Springs, if City Council approves with staff's conditions, will need to turn in an application for a parking lot expansion like any other business would be required to do if they came in with a parking lot.
Okay. Are there timeline requirements on the landscaping, or are we, by extending this variance, are we also extending the variance on the landscaping for the parking lot? For
The
original?
area that you are approving tonight, and this is where this gets complicated, and I didn't want to show the big picture. No, it's understandable. The variance that you're approving tonight, as I mentioned, only applies to that small area, which the landscaping is finished for that area.
It is finished on that?
Yes, they received, let me go back to my aerial, the first one. They received a variance from, let's see if you can kind of see it there a little bit. From providing landscape islands, and they offered a different configuration of the landscaping. You can see a long island there with bulb outs at the end that trees and bushes are planted in. So for the 90 spaces associated with the original approval, the landscaping has been finished.
Okay, so that's done. So as far as anything else for the original development that was approved in 2014, is Iron Mountain Hot Springs in compliance with all the other aspects of that development?
Yes,
Basically.
there are a few things that they are wrapping up internally with staff, but everything is in compliance in that regard.
Okay.
Otherwise,
great.
you would be seeing it right now.
Okay, thanks.
And in 10 seconds or less, can you tell me why, I'm not just going to hold you to that. Why do we require non-permeable surface parking as part of our code? I mean, why is it desirable to have this as a hard surface parking?
I'm no engineer.
Okay, you are.
There's my 10-second answer.
You got good enough. Anybody from the public want to talk?
There is an engineer in the audience.
You know what? If you didn't have a quick,
Perhaps
easy
she has a
answer,
10-second
I don't
answer.
need it.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, I didn't hear the question.
Is there a reason why this has to be non-permeable surface? Why we just can't have it as what it is currently?
It is probably more aesthetic than it is engineering, but I do think that the chips, it's essentially a ground up asphalt and then reseal the dirt below. It works, and we use it in different techniques, but it's no long-term fix, and it tends to degrade faster.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions for staff? All right. Let's open up to the public. Any public comment? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion and/or further discussion. Steve.
I'd make a motion to approve the amendment with the following suggested findings, recommendations, and conditions included on page 6.
Second that. Second.
Moved by Steve, seconded by Rick.
Aw,
Let's call the question.
I wanted to second.
Whoops.
We did it. You did it right.
Hershey, yes. Step, yes. Davis, yes. Goldish, yes. Cow, yes. Voorhees, yes. William, yes. Motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks, Steve. All right, item number 11, planning item 4819, major site architectural review plan and right-of-way encroachment license for an 89-unit multifamily apartment building.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Trent Hyatt with Community Development. I am just going to pass out a suggested motion to you real quick before I get started.
we're going to vote.
That may or may not be helpful later. But before you tonight is planning file number 4819. It's phase 3 of the Lofts development, which is a major site and architectural plan review as well as a right-of-way encroachment license. Just to give you a little background on the process here, Table 60.1 outlines that the Planning and Zoning Commission is the recommending body for all major site and architectural plan reviews that involve 25 or more new dwelling units or 30,000 or more square feet of non-residential space. The Planning and Zoning Commission is the decision-making body for 2 applications that are a part of this proposal, the special use permit as well as the variance. City Council is the decision-making body for the site and architectural plan review as well as the right-of-way encroachment license. Following any approval this evening, city staff would still be involved in a construction plan review of significant engineering and final architectural renderings prior to submittal of a building permit application. In 2002, City Council approved the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan, which include an annexation of the subject property, rezoning, as well as design for buildings and site layout in the area that we all commonly refer to as Glenwood Meadows. In 2015, Phase 1 of the Lofts included 88 multifamily apartments and approximately 5,800 square feet of commercial space. In 2017, another phase that was approved that involved 97 additional multifamily apartment units. Currently proposed is Phase 3, which is 89 multifamily units in a 3-story building with a lower-level parking garage. The footprint of the proposed building is approximately 21,000 square feet, so it totals 86,000 square feet, and it includes some private common areas as well as landscaping and streetscape improvements. This specific parcel, which is Lot 7, is referred to in the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan as Parcel G. It is designated C3 in that plan, and the corresponding city zoning district is M2 Core Commercial. So I'm going to go through a couple of the various sections that are applicable to Parcel G, one being Section 5 open space, and it requires 15% open space via improvements or land transfers to the city. And many of these have already been constructed by the development and required prior to anything being built at the site. And that includes the creation of hiking and biking trails, pedestrian infrastructure such as the Midland Trail, and transfer of the community center property. They do, however, have access, the future tenants of this building would have access to fitness room, club room, internet cafe, as well as a large outdoor patio and fire pit, and bicycle and general storage areas in each phase of the development. This site, however, has 3% of the site dedicated as just open space, and that amounts to 680 square feet.
I'm sorry, say the last thing you just said?
680 square feet.
Okay.
The plan, the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan, refers to the city zoning ordinance for parking requirements. And Table 30.1 requires 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit and 1 space per each 5 dwelling units. That would require generally for this development 152 parking spaces, or a ratio of approximately 1.7 per unit. Realty Capital Management, the applicant, is requesting a cumulative max reduction that's allowed by the code, section 704060E, because of their proximity to transit, the structured parking, the extra bicycle spaces that they are providing, and that amounts to 107 parking spaces, or 1.2 per unit. 101 parking spaces are proposed. That's 60 spaces in the lower level garage, 28 on-street spaces that are specifically dedicated for Parcel G, and then 13 spaces that are in excess from Phase 2 that they will lease from Phase 2. The 6 remaining spaces, they are requesting a payment in lieu of from City Council at 8,000 spaces per each space, or $8,000 per each space. Some considerations in regards to parking, just by their numbers, they have, for the 88 units of Phase 1 that are currently occupied, 102 vehicles registered. So it amounts to a similar ratio as to what they're proposing. That phase also includes some 1 and 2 bedroom units, whereas this phase only includes 1 bedroom and efficiency units. They also have not taken advantage of a potential increase in spaces in the lower level garage, which allows for 10% of those to be compact spaces. The mixed-use C2 district has some specific design standards and requires one or more architectural elements per each 25 horizontal feet of a building. The applicant is proposing various changes in color, texture, wall planes, roof heights, as well as balconies and canopies that extend from each of the walls of the building. The approval criteria, or considerations rather, for a right-of-way encroachment license are outlined in section 706030F3E2. And it states that City Council shall consider whether or not the encroachments further the city's land use and utility goals. And I want to point out that the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan, specifically in Section 8, explains that this area is intended as a framework for a pedestrian-oriented neighborhood street, and it outlines the needs for amenities to enhance this pedestrian experience. Whether or not the two being whether or not reasonably this encroachment could be reasonably accommodated in the applicant's own property. And while it potentially could be, it would not allow us to meet that goal that's outlined in the plan. The encroachments do not compromise public safety, health, or welfare, does not compromise access to other public spaces, nor is it necessary based on a hardship created by the applicant. Section 706056 outlines the site and architectural plan review approval criteria. A, consistency with the general purpose and intent of the code. This application seems to meet the guarding against natural hazards, efficient development, compatible design, and addressing impact sections outlined therein. Consistency with the dimensional design, development, and other standards. Exclusive of the variance that was reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission, this application appears to be consistent with those. Consistency with the previously approved plat, PUD, or other precedent land use approval. And this is consistent with those requirements outlined in the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan as it is designated commercial and secondary commercial center. It supports numerous goals outlined therein, such as encourage economic development, preserve small town character, convenient transportation, infill development, housing opportunities, and social diversity. We did receive some referral comments on this application. Fire department outlined that they need to consider responding fire apparatus in the construction, as well as parking for those workers and the construction folks on site. Engineering and Public Works outlined the need for shoring wall details that have since been provided. Construction, parking, and deliveries, sewer connections, electricity loads, resident parking, broadband needs. Parks and Recreation outlined concerns regarding the use of tree grates in the urban environment. We did receive comment from one adjacent property owner, Nancy Bernard, who stated that she had concerns about street lighting and traffic. The Planning and Zoning Commission considered this application at their meeting last month and discussed various issues, such as bicycle storage in the existing phases, foundation design construction impacts, deed restriction program, future expected rent costs, accessible parking requirements, compost and recycling. However, the majority of their discussion was in relation to the variance to exceed the maximum building length outlined in the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan of 125 feet. That variance, again, was granted for a building length of 337 feet. And they were concerned about the potential bulk and mass of this building, its compatibility with the surrounding development. However, they did decide that the benefit of the additional units was better for the city. They did recommend approval of the major site and architectural plan review. And again, they voted to approve the special use permit related to building height of 51.5 feet and the variance allowing the building length of 337 feet. Section 706030G1D states that City Council can approve with conditions, deny, or continue the application. Staff recommends that you approve the right-of-way encroachment license with the conditions, the findings and conditions on page 3 of the staff report. That's different for your full staff report. Obviously, that's outlined in the suggested motions I provided. As well as we recommend approval on the major site and architectural plan review application. Those findings and conditions are found on pages 3 through 4. And I'd be happy to answer any questions of you. Bob and Rich are here with Realty Capital Management, and I think they're going to provide some comments to you as well. But if you have any questions of staff, I'd be happy to answer those.
Charlie. You get to it again. That'd be you, Charlie.
Oh, I thought you said Shelley. My hearing went going bad again. Okay, I had a couple questions, and I don't know if this addresses to you or to Carl, but when I read the encroachment section, it says that if they don't keep insurance, that we could revoke the encroachment. It doesn't seem like that's a real practical solution here. Am I wrong?
No, you're not, but we've been pretty consistent on being able to keep up with the insurance piece of all of this. So, it is, and the biggest reason is that their lenders really want them to keep the encroachment license.
And the encroachment is actually underground, as I understand. Is that right? It's not on the surface?
Yes, well, it's underground as well as above ground, because there are some streetscape amenities that are being proposed by the applicant, as well as some of those canopies and balconies will encroach into the right-of-way, similar to what you see in our downtown and denser environments.
What are the streetscape ones?
Benches, planters, landscaping.
Okay. Second question I have, I understand that we don't rule on the variance, but if we don't like the length issue, because we don't think that meets the design standards, is there anything we can do with the variance being granted?
You would need to make a finding other than the standard being 150 feet, because that variance has already been granted. So
Right.
essentially the standard is 337 feet, so it would have to be based on something other than what the variance was granted for.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that.
So because the variance was granted by the planning commission.
Which has
That's
final
their-
say on the variance?
Yeah, you don't get to talk about that's not your decision, they're the final decision maker. So effectively, that modifies the design standard to 337 feet of frontage rather than 150, because that variance is in place as the application comes to you. That is the standard you're working with. Does that make sense? It does, but you're not happy with it, I see that.
No. It is, no,
And so
It
if
doesn't
you
make
were,
sense,
if you
sorry.
were inclined, if there are other aspects
because
of
our
the-
code, sorry, our code says, what, 125, 150, whatever.
150, but there was a variance granted that is in place. So you have to treat it as if the standard is now the conditions of the variance.
I see. Okay.
And if I could just point out, it's 125 feet, and it's not necessarily the city's zoning code, it's the Glenwood Meadows Zoning and Development Plan where that is a specific standard.
What is,
That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not
the
a
standard
it's
that
not
applies.
a general,
There's not, you're
it's not a general city requirement, it's something that's specified.
It's a
in the
specific
Glenwood
requirement
Meadows
of this development.
Shelley.
oh, I just was gonna glom onto that question. Do we have a city standard requirement for length of buildings?
We do not.
Okay, so we don't, we wouldn't limit
No.
it. If it was outside of Meadows, we wouldn't limit it to something shorter than
Yeah, I mean, we
337
have,
feet.
similar to the Meadows, we have requirements that, every certain horizontal distance, you have to have a number of architectural elements to
Right.
break that facade up. But no, we don't have a maximum
Which
building length.
they're kind of doing here.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, my other question for you, and I'm a little confused on the variance, because this is a change, I think, with the new code, so. Parking. So are we not talking about a parking variance? Since we went from 150 some odd required to 101? It's a pretty big,
Yeah, it actually, they do have a shortage. Again, they have requested the maximum cumulative reduction, which is outlined and allowed by the code. And they do have a shortage of 6 spaces. And what they
Right.
are requesting is a payment in lieu of as opposed to a variance.
so the reduction down to 107 spaces was per the code, and so that's
Correct.
acceptable.
We get to weigh in on, sorry to jump in, do we get to weigh into that, or is that a condition of the variance? I'm sorry, I'm just trying.
No, that has nothing to do with the variance.
And so that has nothing to do with our approval tonight?
Yeah, well, no, I'm sorry.
It
I mean,
does.
You do have to approve the ability for them for the payment in lieu of.
So we do, but that's not a motion. That's not
I
outlined
think
in
that's a
here?
condition of the site plan.
Yeah, and I believe it may be a finding in the.
Is that one of the
In the
findings?
motion, I'm sorry.
Okay. I guess my question, and this kind of is for you, Carl, and maybe for Trent. I'm wondering, because we get a lot of feedback in the public on the parking issue. And, I don't
question?
perceive it.
Is this a
Yes,
question?
it is a
Okay.
question. I don't perceive it as critical over there because we're in that commercial district and everything. And there is larger parking available. But is it possible, if we're going to reduce the parking requirement on a large multifamily project like this, can we require that since they're registering vehicles, can we make that a requirement or a finding that you can't register more vehicles to the building than you have parking spaces available? I mean, if we're gonna grant a variance for reduced parking requirements on the project, can we hold them to it? That is my
Essentially, what we're saying is, can we require that they have assigned parking so that there is,
I don't know if it
they're
would have
only
to be
using the parking
assigned.
that's available to them?
But if they're I read in the packet that they're registering because they knew the number of vehicles in phase one. So they're kind of keeping track of vehicles anyway. They have to register them with each unit. If we're going to do that, can we set a limit?
I mean, yes, I think the answer would be yes, but the question I have is who enforces that?
Right, but what it would allow us to do is if you run into a problem a couple of years down the road and everybody's up in arms about parking being overcrowded, it gives us somewhat of a
So I think really then, and I don't know, Trent, where that would fit in on the condition list, whether it's just an extra one that just says, you know, there won't be, you know, the number of vehicles permitted, or the number of parking spaces permitted to be utilized is strictly limited to X number. I mean,
right. Something I wanted to ask, is that something we could do? I don't know what the rest of council thinks of it, but if we're going to grant variances on parking, yeah.
Strictly limited as a condition of that, strictly limiting parking to that level.
Supply and demand.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I mean, I think that the issue, there again, becomes an enforcement issue, because, so I take my card out of the window of my car, and I park in the open field of parking at 8 o'clock at night when the Meadows.
Right.
How do we?
And not something that we would enforce, but again, as, you know, thinking ahead to other projects this may apply to.
And I think that's the nature of the variance, is that it is site-specific, right? In terms of whether it works on that site or not. And
Right.
I guess my observation would be is that on, say, on another large multifamily project in some other location in town, it may be that you know, because of the location, it just doesn't work to have a variance, right?
It could be, but I'm thinking of, you know, the unit owners that want to have that extra Jeep or truck and only use it on the weekends. You know,
And maybe
for the ownership of the building to be able to say, no, you can't have two vehicles
Yeah, and,
registered to that unit.
well, and certainly, maybe this is something too, to ask this question about how they plan on enforcing the limited parking that they have when the applicant speaks. Might be a good place to start, and then come back
Okay.
to this during the discussion with council about what a condition might look like.
Okay, thanks.
Paula?
My question, I actually have two, but the first one is back to parking again. When we have these parking requirements that they have to provide so many spaces, are they allowed to charge for those spaces, or are those given that those residents will be able to use those spaces and not incur an additional charge to their rental?
I don't believe we get involved with how they distribute or allow for their tenants to utilize the parking that's required.
So if we have a building go in and we say, well, you need to provide parking for this building and you need at least 100 spaces, they can say, okay, yeah, I'm going to do 100 spaces, but I'm going to
Yeah, I
charge
mean, I
my
suppose they could
residents
charge for
$300
these if they so desired. But I think that we would at least assume that they are required for the uses of the development that has been approved. You know, I don't think someone could sell these for a parking lot per se when they were intended for that use. But we generally don't get involved with how the tenant, or I'm sorry, the management, you know, distributes those.
Right. I'm just concerned that there's leftover parking from phase 2 because people there couldn't afford to pay for whatever the fee was. And I don't know if they pay or charged or anything else, but we're allowing variances in dropping the number of units, I mean, available spaces, and we're giving them an opportunity to have a business. And then we turn around and say, well, okay, you get to drop your number of parking lots to 100, and I'm just like kind of concerned about this whole conundrum of variances and.
Yeah, and actually, I've been using the shorthand of variances. Actually, underneath the new code, we have this in lieu of fee for parking that can be utilized. It has to be agreed to by you as council, but it's, you know, it's conceptually different than a variance in terms of that in lieu of fee. And I guess my only comment would be is that, you know, we, especially in land use application, try to not drift into business regulation, which is kind of where I feel like we're going. We're saying, what, you know, you got to charge this for a parking space, but not that. That's kind of a step into the market that historically the council has not made, and we don't really have the regulations in place to do that.
Okay. But we can say whether or not that they should allow compact parking and increase the number of spaces they have available.
Yeah, that's certainly reasonable, as well as Shelley's comment. You know, I think if you're, and the thing about Glenwood Meadows, it may not be an issue today, but there's a significant amount of development that could still occur in Glenwood Meadows, so it's something to think about for the future.
I do think the parking questions are going to staff, yeah.
Okay. And is there, like, I looked at kind of the outline of what these apartments look like and stuff. Is there storage space for these residents included in the design? I didn't quite catch that, so I was just.
Yeah, and it's on the lower level garage area. If you take a look at that floor plan, you'll see that there's some storage there.
Per unit or just overall in general?
I don't think it's per unit. That previously was a requirement in our code that is no longer there, you know, requirement of space per unit, but they are providing some.
Okay.
Sorry, Paul, I'm trying to pull that up, but
You went past
You
finding
passed
is
it.
easy. Okay.
There it is.
Yeah, it's on the east and west end of those.
The little tiny closets
The
on the
garage.
east and west end. Got it. Okay.
Are you good, Paula?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, sorry. Councilor Voorhees.
Thank you. How is the current parking going in Phase 1, Phase 2? Are people finding enough spots? Are there complaints from people about the numbers of spots that are available? I know you've got the whole mall parking down below, so I'm assuming that, you know, things are reasonably okay. Are there any trouble spots that you're aware of, Trent?
We haven't received any complaints about the parking. I think what the applicant will tell you, and they can provide more information, Rick, on this, is that they're actually requesting a ratio that's similar to the number of registrations of cars that they have in Phase 1 now. So it appears, at least, that they have enough parking based on their information.
So in Phase 3 is actually, the floor space is smaller per unit, and so there are more studios and one-bedrooms than there were in Phase 1 and 2?
Correct.
My second question is, do we have a sense of what the rental charges are going to be in Phase 3? How do they compare to Phase 1 and 2? And have the rents increased from when we looked at this in April 2017 to where we are now?
I would probably defer to the applicant on that. And they could explain maybe any changes that they've had in the leasing of Phase 2 as compared to what they've received for Phase 1 and hope to for Phase 3.
Good, Rick? Okay. Tony, questions?
No, I don't have any, sorry. I tried to unpush it, but I couldn't.
That's okay. All right, is the applicant, Richard, like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Richard Myers with Realty Capital Management, and we're the applicant and also the co-developer of Phase 1 and 2. And I really would like to thank Trent and the staff for their hard work on this, and they've been excellent to work with. Apologize for the length of the the package, but there's a lot of, obviously, detail in there. And you've got some excellent questions already that I might touch on a few of those in a minute. But we started, I really started looking at this site about 8 years ago, and over 7 years ago started working on this project. And we're thrilled and very delighted at where we are today, and so that's why, one of the reasons we're here for Phase 3. We're finishing basically the remainder of Phase 2 right now, and Phase 1 we opened last spring. It took a while, and people might wonder, why did it take so long? And it was interesting to me because this always seemed like a kind of a perfect mixed-use residential opportunity, Glenwood Meadows. We thought the entire Glenwood Meadows project was very well thought out. We love the Market Street next to this location. But it took, besides kind of the initial approvals and, one of the main things that caused it to take a while was it was very difficult actually to get this project financed. And what's interesting is it has leased up faster than any project in our company's 30-year history. And so you wonder, why was it so difficult for us to get it financed? And I was going all over the United States, talking to people in Denver and all over the place, looking for the financing for this project. And as much as folks in Denver and Chicago and LA and Dallas love the mountains, they're scared to invest in a project like this here. And that surprised me a little bit, but these tend to be institutional investors, and so they're more afraid of kind of stepping out there in what they perceive as taking a risk. And they thought, this isn't the usual kind of project, or you just don't see a lot of these in the Roaring Fork Valley. It's very difficult to find zoning that allows this. And so for them, it wasn't like Denver where there's 4 projects, 200 yards away that they can kind of point to and say, well, it works there, so my project is probably a good bet also. And so finally we partnered up basically with a couple of families that put, besides us and our partners, put most of the capital in. And they recognized that there was a need right away, and they weren't as scared as some of the institutional investors. So anyway, we're now, once you kind of become a pioneer like that, now people, it seems fairly obvious to people that there was demand, and hopefully this will encourage other people to invest in Glenwood Springs by seeing that you can, build multifamily housing and it'll do okay, and people will show up and rent the apartments. I'd like to just briefly, because maybe some of you haven't been inside the units, thought I'd give you kind of a quick tour of what the phase 1 and 2 at least kind of look like. I think you've seen from Trent this rendering. That's of phase 3, so that's the back of phase 3, and then you see phase 1 and 2 behind it. So this is not a rendering. These are actually photographs now. So this is, I think, a one-bedroom model unit. That's a living room right there. The bedroom and kitchen. We do very nice countertops, very good cabinetry. The quality of the project, we're very pleased with how it turned out. Bathroom, and quite a few of the bathrooms we do double sinks. This is, Trent had mentioned some of the amenities. This is on the back side of the lofts, and this is kind of the outdoor barbecue area. It's actually, that screen is an outdoor TV, and it's kind of a special one with some sort of screen that it's easier to see in the bright sunlight, and there's grills and seating areas and all kinds of things. That's sort of a view from above. There's a few fire pits there and seating areas and so forth. We have, that's just a fraction of the exercise room. We get a lot of compliments about that. And here's one of our bicycle storage areas. As you know, people take cycling very seriously, and there's a lot of expensive bikes in this town. And we built a few of these, and we're looking at maybe even having more bicycle storage, sort of, I guess, per unit on phase 3 than we even have in phase 1 and 2. And pet wash area. Those guys, they don't look very wet, so I'm not sure whose dogs they got to kind of pose for that.
They're posed
picture.
very nicely.
Yeah.
My dog wouldn't do that.
No, it's hard to get them to do that. Some people have asked us, you've got the great amenities and very high quality unit finishes, and how do you do that and still attract, kind of the workforce renters of, the Roaring Fork Valley and I-70 corridor. And some of it is economies of scale. So when you build a lot of units like this and you buy 200 kitchen countertops, you get a better price than if you're only building 6 units or 8 units. And so we spend a lot of time really with the unit design and finishes to really try to create a high quality, kind of lasting interior finish that people appreciate, but also is at least, reasonably priced, because obviously you have to have the units affordable for, most people in Glenwood Springs. And, we've, before we built the first buildings, and even now, occasionally we'll hear from folks, not necessarily our renters, but we hear from folks outside that necessarily haven't been there, these aren't affordable, because the rents are pretty high, and basically the rents range from about $1,500 to about $2,500 a month or so. And, they're not officially affordable per, an affordable housing unit, but actually they're very affordable. I said that this project leased up faster than any project in our company's 30-year history. That tells you something about potentially the housing shortage here too. And these rents are not inexpensive. But it was interesting, I recently looked at, besides registering cars, which we can talk about, we, get a rental application, we know what people's jobs are. And here's just some of the jobs of the people that live at the lofts. Restaurant manager, massage therapist, night auditor, registered nurse. We actually have 3 registered nurses. We have retired people. We have 3 baristas even. One of them put Starbucks. I'm not sure where the other 2 are baristas. Retail cashier, a store manager, administrative assistant, teachers. We have 3 or 4 teachers, a carpenter, special ed teacher, dental hygienist, school bus driver, construction laborer, bank teller, probation officer.
Lawyers.
Ski patrol, and bud tenders even, a couple of those. I could go on, there's many others, but if our units aren't affordable, then how do those people afford them? Because that's just classic workforce, these are the folks that I think we want to live in Glenwood Springs and, work close by. And, so that's just kind of a feel for who lives there. I thought that might be interesting. What we're doing with Phase 3 is actually trying to even make them sort of more affordable, because as someone mentioned, we're only doing studios and we're only doing 1-bedrooms. And in fact, we created a smaller studio, and we're doing the smaller version. We had multiple 1-bedrooms, and we're tending to go mostly with the small 1-bedrooms in Phase 3. Because, like any place, kind of your monthly rent, it's not just what it is, whatever per square foot, it's what am I actually paying out of pocket per month. And so we noticed that on Phase 1 and 2, that while the 2-bedrooms leased up quickly, the highest, even faster were the studios and the 1-bedrooms. And so we thought, clearly there's a need there. And so that's why we're doing Phase 3 with all studio and 1-bedrooms. It's actually sort of less profitable for us to do that, because if you think about it, every unit needs a kitchen, and the kitchens are by far the most expensive part of a house or an apartment. And so when you have a 2-bedroom unit, you're spreading the kitchen costs over a much bigger space than when you have a studio. And so in a way, our costs per foot are higher, but we think there's a need there, and overall then it makes the mix of the entire development much more heavy on studios and 1-bedrooms, and we think that's fine, and we think that'll stand the test of time too. The other thing that's quite expensive about Phase 3 is that we have an underground parking garage under the building, and I think you saw it on the plan. The cost of that is around $2 million. So, we have some parking garages on the other one, but it's not underground. And underground with the concrete podium deck and so forth is way more expensive than just a framed, private parking garage like we have on the back of Phase 1 and 2. And so why are we doing that? Well, we had to find parking someplace. This site is somewhat peculiar because it's almost like when the Glenwood Meadows development was created, they almost designed this site exactly for a multifamily building. I don't know that they really knew at the time that was going to be that way. But literally, to have the center corridor and units on each side, that site is within about a foot of the exact dimensions that it needs to be. So we have very little room for error, and that's one reason why we have the shoring, encroachment that we're talking about, because we have to kind of dig back in order to give us a little room to create the wall there in the garage. But anyway, there was no other place to put parking besides under the building, so that's why we're doing that. And if you look at the topography, as you might have seen on the one rendering, the commercial parking on the other side of the building, is about 12 or 15 feet below, So that worked out well too. So it's almost like a walkout basement, even though it's completely enclosed. But on your house, if you had a walkout basement, it kind of, this building kind of functions that way. I think that I'd like to talk just a touch on the building length, because I think it sounds like there might have been some concern on that. We're trying to create articulation and effectively, visual breaks in this building anyway. And the problem with breaking the building in half and having like a 20-foot gap or something, I'm not sure it really accomplishes much. It actually costs another probably $500,000, which just once again makes the building more expensive and then causes more of an affordability issue just on rents and so forth. In addition to that, then you would have an exposed underground garage for that 20 feet that gets rain and snow and everything else. And you can technically waterproof that so that it sort of stands the test of time. But if you look around the country where there are exposed garages like that, particularly when it's at ground level and you have, grass or something there, the water kind of sits on it, they often leak. And so then, you're tearing them back up, and it's particularly not good because when they're leaking on cars and the water seeps through the concrete, we've actually seen it where it's sort of kind of permanently staining the cars, because I think the water going through the concrete almost creates sort of an acid or something. And so it's much sort of safer from a waterproofing standpoint to have the building cover the entire garage, and so that's one of the key reasons why we did that. Also, one thing to point out with this building, the other building looked pretty big from the street, even height-wise. And this building, they're 4 stories at street level. This building's only three stories. Also, they're on the high side of Wolfson, so it feels even higher. And I think that the top of this building will actually be 15 or 20 feet lower than the current building. So I think that'll provide some visual relief too, and won't be, it won't be feel quite as massive. On the parking, when we first met with the staff to kind of talk about what we thought we wanted to do here, I didn't realize you'd passed a new parking ordinance. And because we had gone through quite a bit of parking discussion 5 years ago or whatever when we were in front of City Council, because at that point, the ordinance required, I don't know, it might have been 2 spaces per unit or something like that, and that was fairly outdated. Most cities around the country, particularly in a location like this where you have bus stops and it's more of a walkable community, we were seeing parking ratios much lower than that. So even back in 2014 and 15, we were talking to the city and showing them evidence of around the country about the parking ratios. When I saw your current ordinance, it's one of the best parking ordinances I've ever seen because it actually thinks about how parking actually functions, and so you get credit for being on the raft to bus line, bike storage and things like that, and versus just some fixed number that doesn't relate to where the location is. And so this is the perfect higher density location for multifamily because you're basically right at the beginning of the bus line, and we have quite a few people that already in phase 1 and 2 that bus to work every day up to Aspen or wherever. And so the parking for phase 1 and 2, we had the registered parking, I think at 1.16. And remember this, that registered parking doesn't equal even maximum usage, because that's every car that they ever potentially intend to have at that location. But a lot of times, people are out of town in Denver on the weekend, or they went to the airport because they're flying someplace and left their car there at a friend's house or whatever. And so even the 1.16, we've never even hit that because you never have every single registered car on site. In addition to that, as I think one of you pointed out, we have no 2 bedrooms this time, and the parking ratio is per unit. So if you have smaller units, you tend to have fewer cars with a studio than you do with a 2-bedroom, obviously. So even though we're proposing a ratio quite close to where we are in phase 1 and 2, there's even less demand for parking than there will be on phase 1 and 2. We're never going to have a parking problem at the lofts. I can absolutely assure you, and we've seen, we just have evidence from around the country, plus now we have evidence right here. The peak parking time for the lofts is 3 o'clock in the morning, which is probably the absolute opposite of everything else around us. So, in theory, if you look at Wolfson Road, there's a certain number of parking spaces on our part of Wolfson allocated for phase 1, 2, and 3 for Chili's and, other users. And I can't imagine this would ever be the case, but if for some reason in the middle of the night, if just absolutely it was maxed out and there was more demand than we've ever seen before, there's 1 million parking spaces even on Wolfson that aren't even allocated to us. So, we're not big fans of we absolutely don't want to underpark a project because our financial partners and us hate that because that causes you financial problems. Because if you ever have a parking problem, word gets around and then people don't want to live there. So we always study this in great detail, and I just tell you, here we just, this is appropriately parked, and your ordinance is quite good at, looking at what causes really demand for parking and what reduces that. And I've got to compliment you on your new ordinance, and it's very objective and easy to figure out too. So I thought that was good. One quick comment on storage. We're going to have more storage than you see on those plans. We have a ton of storage on phase 1 and 2. When you come off the private garages and you enter the corridor on the first level or the second level, there's quite a few kind of 6x8 storage closets right off the hallway, and those are extremely popular. And so we're going to create those inside the building envelope here too. I think that's kind of the main things I want to point out. So certainly available for any questions. And once again, I really appreciate the consideration.
Questions for the applicant? Paula?
So in your phase 1 and phase 2, and in not only your 2 bedrooms, but your 1 bedroom and your efficiencies there, do you usually have one person per unit in the 1 bedroom and efficiencies, or is that, like you were talking about what people's salaries were, but a lot of times in this town, both people in that residence are working or 1 or 2 jobs, and so I'm just kind of getting a feel for that.
Yeah, the studios I'd say are almost virtually all one person, and the 1 bedrooms will sometimes, we'll have sometimes 2 people there. But it's interesting, we have a fair amount of retired people. I think we're about 25% empty nesters and retired people, and a lot of those folks in 1 and 2 bedrooms only have 1 car.
And are they from here, the retired people, or are they from?
Yeah. You have people that, just don't want their house. The house is too big, too much hassle, and so they kind of tour this and they see kind of the new finishes, and it's just, I know as I'm kind of getting up there, all of a sudden time is kind of important, and spending time on house maintenance and all that seems not as interesting to me as it did before, and so we get folks like that. I think we've had a few retired people move here, which surprised us. We didn't expect that, and they wanted to be near their grandkids. So a daughter or son, lives in the valley, and
Right.
they wanted to be near their grandkids. But mostly it's folks that have already been here.
Okay.
Shelley?
So, thanks for the presentation, and you heard our talk a little bit earlier about the parking, trying to,
Registration? Or?
yeah, registration or just, and limiting that to the parking that's approved for the project. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's basically fine. The question I think Carl had, I'm not sure how we would enforce that. I mean, we basically register everyone's car because what we want to make sure, and the reason we do that is it's not so much our people that would cause a parking problem, but if all of a sudden, I don't know, some other use around us was starting to park in, our spaces or in our garage, that helps us identify violators, basically.
Right.
And so that tends to happen occasionally, and so that's why we do that. But, I just don't know how we would work with the city on sort of enforcing that. We could send in our registrations, I guess, or something, maybe on an annual
I
basis.
guess my concept is that if it were a condition of the approval, it's something that's kind of there in our back pocket if there is a problem in the future, not something that would be like tracked on a regular basis or enforced unless it were an issue that came up. I don't really foresee that as much in Meadows, although I'm interested in just having that as something, as part of the approval, just if it does come up in the future. I think.
Yeah, we'd be generally fine with the concept, just kind of the enforceability thing. I would say that your ordinance is, it's not just because we want this approved. I'm telling you, I've looked at parking ordinances in many, many cities and municipalities, and yours is one of the best I've ever seen in the United States now. It's that well thought out. I tell you, it's going to work, and I think you can trust your ordinance, and because it does say, we have to plan so we have so many parking spaces, usable by us. But in Glenwood Meadows too, like we were saying, it's the perfect shared use to have residential next to retail, because
right, it is.
It's perfect.
You get that mixed use benefit, different hours of parking, and I do appreciate having that lower level of parking on this building too. That certainly helps a lot and makes it work. So, okay, thanks.
You bet.
Councilor Voorhees.
This is a very good-looking project. I know
Thank you.
we talked several years ago when you were trying to get it sort of off the ground, so congratulations. I mean, it looks nice.
Thanks for the help.
So in terms of the rents, you probably thought about that, and I'm just curious, what you see as the projected rents for the units now, how that might compare to Phase 1 and 2, and I also respect the fact that you have quite an investment here, and nobody expects anybody to breathe air for free or build apartments for free. So I'm just kind of curious, though, where you see your charges now and where you might see them in a few years, which is hard to predict. So.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I forgot to. I think some of you had asked about, what have our rents done so far in Phase 1, and so a few comments. Our rents are about the same as when we opened a year ago. I think, there's been a couple of units where we've moved up or down somewhat, but there hasn't been a lot of change there. And, the beauty of competition, we now have competition because of across I-70 there with Six Canyons. And so it's a healthy thing. When you're the only game in town, you tend to get a little overconfident. So there's nothing wrong with that. And I hope they do well too, and I think they probably will. The rents on Phase 3 we think will just be kind of similar, except we did create even a smaller studio, so that will even most likely be somewhat less than, obviously, the current studio rents. Because, we're trying to effectively get as cheap of a unit as possible from a rental standpoint, just so we can attract folks. And Councilperson Stepp asked about, the other day I was in our kind of game room with the coffee bar, and this couple came in, and I forget their jobs they had, but they were thrilled to be in the development, and they were moving up a size in the units. I don't know, going from a small one-bedroom to a slightly larger, and they were just super excited about that possibility. So that's one of the benefits of also the real small studios is it gives people the opportunity to live there longer too, and maybe all of a sudden they get married or something, and they still want to stay there, but they need a bigger place. So I think it should help the flexibility of the project. And let's see, was there other rent questions you had?
No, I think you probably
Okay.
covered that part of it. I was just curious what your thinking was as reported to by the planning and zoning and the press, and your response to the question. And maybe it wasn't you, so this could be an unfair question, but what are your thoughts, or your company's thoughts about rent control for any of these units that are coming online?
Well,
Mr. Mayor, how is this relevant to the variance? Can I ask that question, please? These questions on parking and rents.
You can ask that question.
Okay, I'm asking it rhetorically.
Okay.
We're not fans of that because we don't think it's needed for this location and this project. And we have cashiers and baristas, and we, ski patrol people. And so somehow this is working, even without rent control. And there's nothing wrong with, having official affordable units. Glenwood Greens is right behind us, and that's great. And so the mix of those is perfectly fine. And I think it's great for Glenwood Springs that you can show the marketplace and the world that you can build something like this that is market rate, and these kind of folks can live here, and it can work economically, and that will attract other people to build housing in town too.
Yeah, I didn't want to make that sound judgmental. I just know that I was hanging out there from, the previous application to P&Z, and I thought I'd give you an opportunity to sort of expound. It's not completely within the questions that we'll be voting on here tonight, but I think just in the spirit of public discussion, it's good to get those issues out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing and open it to public comment.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Michael Hoban. I live in Glenwood. I've been here a long time. I don't know. It seems like this gentleman spent a lot of time in Disneyland or something. I don't think these rents are affordable. I think the prices are ridiculous. And there's no restrictions on, on a year or so, what they might be. But my main concern is I want to thank council for Coffee with Council. I've been to the first two, and they were fabulous. They were so nice, just relaxing, and you could let go with whatever in a nice environment. One thing a friend of mine brought up, Rob Anderson, which kind of knocked me out, is I believe he asked Mr. Williams, what is the number of people in the city? Yeah, the carrying capacity in Glenwood Springs. Do you have a number for that? I mean, that makes sense to me, because if we just keep rolling and keep building and developing and so on, and pretty soon it gets to a point where I think it's already there, of no return. We're bumping into each other. People are not smiling anymore. You can't get anywhere. We have plenty of issues, but we still have a little bit of magic left. And I've lived in a couple places growing up that I've seen go from just wonderful, beautiful, fantastic to unlivable. So, again, I've been here since 1970, and I see that happening. It's been going on for a long time, up and down the valley. I know how desirable it is to be here. This has always been a very special place for me. The other thought I think is huge is, if we recall, in the 90s, I believe, the Wolfson Ranch was up for sale, and the city for a couple million or so could have bought the whole, from the community center all the way out west. And they proposed a golf course on the property, and the engineer said the ground was too unstable for a golf course. We see that in the roads. We see it in the MOC, which is a huge hit for us taxpayers. It's going to be, I'm guessing, 50 million because it's not livable anymore. I mean, the building's uninhabitable. So everybody's, they're finding other places. There's parks and electric and everything else. So it's just insanity. I mean, this is all it's heading down towards the river, some slower than others. And there's going to be issues. And again, the public will have to cover it in the long run. So thank you so much for letting me share.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for a motion and/or further comment. Whoa.
I just had a.
Jeez, go.
I wasn't allowed.
That just lit up. Go ahead, Tony.
I appreciate what the citizen just said, and I think that this council at some point is going to have to take a hard look at carrying capacity. But none of that has anything to do with this project. Someone said, and she'll deny it, that a variance by its nature goes against the intent of the code. And I understand that, but I think the P&Z decided that there would be a trade-off. If we deny this tonight, they're going to build it anyway. It's just they're going to break it up. We can't, and that's why I asked all these other questions about parking and rents. They're irrelevant to the discussion tonight. So I would make a motion to support this variance. If someone would second that, I would appreciate it.
I think you would read the motion to approve.
Yes, I'm sorry. I would move to approve the major site architectural plan application with the recommended findings and conditions listed on page 273 and 274 of the February 20th, 2020 staff proposal, and to approve the right-of-way encroachment license application with the recommended findings and conditions listed on page 273 of that same staff report packet.
Second.
It's been moved by Tony, seconded by Steve. Further conversation. Councilor Woolman.
Thank you. And I appreciate the project. I think it's what's there already has been an asset to the city. I'm not crazy about the mass. I'll be very transparent, but that's the P&Z gave a variance. That's their job. We have to support the code. I guess one comment came up in the coffee for council this morning, kind of just as so you know, and I'm going to talk to staff about this too, is there was complaints about the lighting coming from the lofts, particularly at night, that it isn't downward as it's supposed to be in the code. I don't know if it is or is not, because I haven't had a chance to go out and look at it at night, but just keep that in mind as you're doing the lighting. And I guess just a general comment, rents in this community are, they were bad when I moved here back in 1976, and I had to pay $150 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. So, I thought that was terrible, but I didn't make much money either. So, I'm really an antique. But when you talk about the people that are living there, the concern I have is, I just did a quick calculation, and I'm not contesting those people are living there, but if you make $15 an hour, you make $2,600 a month gross. So these people are probably working a couple jobs, but that's the nature of the community. And you have a right as a developer to charge market rate and do that. And I'm glad to see that we have workforce there. I suspect a lot of those people are working 2 jobs to make that work.
Charlie?
And it's just more of a comment.
Yeah, but we're trying to make a recommendation based on the facts, and this is a free market thing, so.
I understand.
I appreciate the comments, but it's not really relevant.
It was to me.
Okay.
I'm finished.
Are there any more comments about rent? Councilor Voorhees.
Yeah, just in the swale of things, several years ago, we did away with a requirement, and this has nothing to do with this project, okay? So I'm off beam here, but we did away with the requirement that a certain number of units needed to be rent controlled. And I think that given our demographics, given what we know about income levels, that we ought to revisit that at some point. The other thing that's maybe more on beam, but probably slightly off beam, depending upon where your pendulum swings, is the whole issue of parking ratios. 1.5 to me seems to be sort of ridiculous if we're trying to promote a quality of life in this town for our citizens and the people who'll be renting for a while. Not so much an issue with this project, but it certainly is with your competitors across the river. We don't have a very good idea how that's going to work out, and I hope that it's something less than pandemonium. Thank you.
Shelley.
I was going to suggest an amendment to the motion, Councilor Hershey, if you would consider it. It would just be to add a recommended condition that states applicant agrees that car parking registrations for the building will not exceed 101 spaces.
Carl, my concern is that I don't know that that's relevant to this variance.
Well, it is in the sense that you're approving a fee in lieu. There's a nexus there that I'm comfortable with. So I question enforceability, but that's true of a number of things, and it is something to bring up later.
I would defer to the majority and to Mr. Davis.
Steve?
Would you be willing
Amendment.
to amend your second?
No.
Shelley's condition?
No, then I'm not going to.
I'm not interested really in that.
No.
Okay.
I just don't think, if I could expand on that a little bit, I think that there
No.
are times when,
Counselor Stepp?
Oh, I have other comments.
sorry, when you asked me,
No, I didn't. I would like.
I asked Mr. Davis, so my answer is no, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and I accept
Sorry,
that.
Shelley.
I do have other comments. I'd like to make one comment just to the public comment we received from Mr. Hogan and other comments that were heard at Coffee at Council about carrying capacity for the town. I have a hard time with even thinking about that. I think this project is very appropriately cited. There's all kinds of commercial there. There's shopping for these residents. There's transit. It's a great location. And we need housing. And if you try to put up walls and say, this is our community and nobody else can come here and we're getting too crowded, all of a sudden, our kids can't live here and our grandkids can't live here, and we're creating an exclusive community. And research shows that the prices just go up as a result. And the growth, it doesn't stop growth. It means growth just gets pushed on down the road. It gets pushed up 4 Mile, or it gets pushed down I-70 to Newcastle to Silt, and creating more traffic and a lot more issues. So I think we have to think really hard before we think about trying to put up a gate and say we can't take any more development here. This is the kind of development we need. It's dense. People can walk and bike to where they want to be, and I support it.
I'll just say I think that those are great comments about carrying capacity. Mr. Hogan, I really appreciate your comments when we had Council with Coffee a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad you stuck around for the second one. But I think growth is a regional one, and I completely agree. Western Garfield County is going to grow, and we're going to get a ton of people there. And we can either gridlock Grand Avenue from 2 p.m. till 10 p.m. every single day and make travel north and south and east and west in our community impossible, and it's not going to be a livable community. When we talk about what a livable community means, it's not a gridlocked community. Well, you know, Mr. Hogan, good gosh. Come on, man.
That's right, mine went off earlier.
You know what? So I agree with Shelley. I think it's a great location. I think we should be looking at these projects because whether we control growth or growth happens to us into our town, we need to be at the forefront. So I'll be supporting the motion that's on the table. Rick, I would absolutely agree that we should give possibly planning and zoning some guidance on coming back to us about a deed restriction suggestion. I don't know where that'll go. I don't know if they will have one for us, but I would love for them to have a workshop to talk about that and see if that's something we want to re-examine. So I'm very supportive.
Worth a discussion.
Very supportive of that. Paul.
I went through this with a fine-tooth comb because, I am a huge component of finding housing for us, and I'm finding affordable housing for our workforce. And that's really important to me that we really look at, can people afford to live here? Yes, they are going to come, but we have to make sure that they're able to do things besides just pay for housing. So those were some of my questions. And then the other part of this, and this is why I brought up parking, because part of what we're approving tonight is removing some of the parking for the fee, $8,000 per parking space. We've already dropped the parking quite a bit due to our own town codes and variances, and I really want to look at that. People come here to live, to enjoy this place, and from my perspective, as with Charlie talking about moving here a long time ago and what the rents were and that type of stuff, every place I have lived with a partner, and we've had 2 cars, and we like to go play in the mountains, and we like to, one of us may be going to Denver one weekend, and somebody can be going somewhere else. So I get really afraid that we're going to give up parking now, and then 20 years hence, we're going to need that parking space as we develop it. So my only qualm to this is it sounds like we're moving forward and also approving the fee, and we're not bringing up the discussion at all of making those compact spaces available in the garage space that would allow some extra parking as well. So I want to make sure that we're taking care of the people that are moving into these places. So I think we need the housing. So this is really difficult, but I really would like some clarity. Is that what we're approving, that they do not have to provide the parking that at least could be allowed within this scope? With the compact parking, we're giving up the extra parking spaces. Is that correct?
The question that's on the table is
We're giving that up.
without that condition, yes.
Is without that condition. So that's my difficulty in going forward on this, is I just feel like, let's take care of the people moving into these places to the degree that we can.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right, see none, let's call the question.
Hershey, yes. Step, no. Davis, yes. Golds, yes. Kaup, yes. Voorhees, yes. Willman, yes. Motion passes.
Congratulations.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, we need
I move to
to,
approve the right-of-way encroachment license application with the recommended findings and conditions listed on page 273 of the February 20, 2020 staff packet.
denied. All right, next item.
Our vote was for both.
What?
Yes.
Oh, then I missed the motion. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
I thought you missed that, so. I thought the mayor screwed up again, so, that's.
The mayor typically is the one that screws up, so
I
I appreciate
apologize.
this.
I thought it had not been covered.
All right,
Thank you, Charlie.
Can we have a 5-minute recess?
yeah. Is everybody okay at 5 minutes?
Yep.
Sorry, Terry.
Oh, it's fine.
We'll be back here at 8:10.
$2,000 a month. No, it's really got a teeny one-bedroom apartment.
That's their deal.
But that's her choice.
You're sweet. All right, everybody? Hey, Rick. Hey, Rick. Rick.
You're the third person
You
to
grab
tell
Charlie?
me, so I'm going to make it short.
P and Z? Oh,
Charlie.
the, at 5 o'clock. I was at city
What don't you
council.
understand about 810? What don't you understand about 810?
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, that's exactly what.
I apologize, I've got held up in the hallway, I apologize.
All right, item number 12. Southbridge.
Good evening, Council. This is a review of a contract extension for Jacobs Engineering to finish our planning and design for Southbridge, the Southbridge project. It was budgeted in the 2020 budget with a combination of our bond funds and our remaining federal earmark funds. There really haven't been any changes that are significant to the project since the last time we reviewed it. Again, it would cover, it is a large contract extension, approximately $3.5 million to, again, finish the design, go through the right-of-way process, not including the actual right-of-way purchase, and finalize the environmental assessment. I did include the scope of work, or the description of all of the scope and the schedule. Right now, to complete, the rest of the project, we're really looking into 2021. An early finish of right-of-way for the project would be February of 2021, and late finish would be May of 2021. I've had 3 requests to keep it short. That's my short description. Do any of you have any questions?
All right, any questions for Terry?
Right. So there you go.
All right, seeing none, I will open it to public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a motion. Steve?
I'd like to move to approve the funding and to finalize design and right-of-way for Southbridge.
Second.
Second. I'm kidding.
Been moved by Steve, seconded by myself, just because I want a second on
Sure,
Southbridge.
understand?
All right, any further conversation? All in favor? Great presentation, Terry.
Thank you, Terry, Pat. Parch.
Could you make it a little shorter next time?
Well, I don't know.
Go ahead.
There's like 5 sentences.
Steph, yes. Davis, yes. Goldish, yes. Kaup, yes. Voorhees, yes. Willman, yes. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. Ordinance number 5, series of 2020, half baths versus full baths, and not charging for a full bath when it could be a half bath. Go, Den.
It's actually Hannah, and she rented us from thinking that Terry's presentation might not be.
So ironically, she's in the half bath.
Were there any, seriously, do you guys have questions? It was fairly
No.
self-explanatory.
No.
I would move to approve that ordinance.
Someone a second?
Second.
Moved by Tony, seconded by Paula. Any further discussion?
Reasonable.
You didn't have to read it?
I had to read the other one.
All right, let's call the question.
Already read them?
Hurd, yes. Step, yes. Davis, yes. Goldish, yes. Kaup, yes. Voorhees, yes. Willman, yes. Motion passes unanimously.
All right.
Looking for a motion to table item number 14.
Oh, I make a motion to table this matter.
Rick, would you like to second that?
I'd second that.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, amendment of South Midland Design Contract with SGM.
I'll try to keep this brief as well. This is just a contract amendment for Schmeisser Gordon Meyer, SGM, in the amount of $117,000. This is additional work that amounted to designing the broadband utility, providing support for the NEPA process that was required through the federal build grant, doing additional structural work and help with our right-of-way acquisitions, legal descriptions and that kind of thing, and water line design as well. So it amounted to an additional $117,000 on the contract, and I still think we're still well below, kind of an expected percentage of the overall construction contract.
I just have one question, to be real quick.
Sure.
I saw part of it was going to be paid by the utility fund, which made sense. Is that in the 117?
It is in the 117.
Okay, so So all of this won't come out of A&I, some will come out of utility.
Yeah, some
Will
of
we
it can
fund
come
it?
out of our utility funding. That,
Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
okay.
Okay, thank you. That's the only question I have.
Any other questions? All right, is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? See none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion and/or further discussion.
For approval.
Make a motion to amend the SGM design contract to add $117,000 for additional design services.
Second the motion.
Moved by Rick, seconded by Shelley. Any further conversation?
Thinking the same thing.
Let's call the question.
And we
Did
gave
you
him,
want to call the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
and we gave him $1 million last week.
No,
Oh,
you can
sorry.
do
Hershey, no. Step, yes. Davis, yes. Goldish, yes. Kaup, yes. Voorhees, yes. Willman, yes. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
Well, I'm not competent to tell Terry that it's not deserving.
Again, great presentation, Terry.
Anna's going to come back from
Approval of Resolution 2026 authorizing and supporting the application for a grant in the amount of $200,000 from the FLMD for the Two Rivers Park pedestrian safety project and committing the city to a $200,000 match. So if someone wants to give us a $200,000 if we put up our own $200,000?
Didn't we already put up? No.
So this is a part of the considerations around the Iron Mountain Hot Springs and the Two Rivers Park development, a lot of pedestrians in the area, and a need to bring the pedestrian from that pedestrian bridge instead of into the park along Devereaux Road and make a connection at Centennial there. Steve Beckley in the past has promised through a different development process that he would help us with that project. He's recently offered to support us with $300,000 of that of the total $700,000 for that particular piece of trail, a very expensive piece of trail. But with that, the city would put up $200,000 in a 2021 budget. It would be a promise for funds in 2021, as well as another $200,000 request from Federal Mineral Lease District. So we'd be writing into the application that the city would support it through the 2021 budget.
I would say it was one of those things that there was a request for $300,000 from staff in the 2020 budget, and I cut it. And then we closed the park, and it became glaringly obvious that wasn't the best decision I'd ever made. And then this came up as an idea about 2 weeks ago, and we just jumped on it.
So, I'm sorry, Deborah, to accomplish.
To get that piece of sidewalk, this way we have pedestrian access where everyone walks, in the road
Which
dangerously.
we don't have now, which you and I
Correct.
discussed today.
Yeah.
Right.
So, Shelley, do you have questions for staff?
I do, Terry. I'm wondering, so you could see where the path is going to go along that west side of Two Rivers. Where does it go once it hits that intersection?
So, and I apologize, I'm kind of scattered with the acceleration, but I did have a graphic. The current construction project at Two Rivers has a sidewalk that will connect along the side of the driveway and bring you back into the park.
Okay.
And then with Steve Beckley's Iron Mountain project, there's a section of sidewalk that will be immediately on the south side of the CDOT parking lot that's there today.
Okay.
And it'll take you into the Iron Mountain Hot
So
Springs.
they're going to sidewalk all the way from Devereaux to the Iron
To
Mountain.
Iron Mountain
Okay.
Hot Springs, and
Okay.
then,
So we'll put a crosswalk in and all of
Yep, there's an RFB, a
Good stuff.
crosswalk,
Okay.
all of those things.
that? Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
Great.
Counselor Charlie. Counselor Willman. Charlie.
Just a quick question, and I assume that this may be just one of those stupid questions. If we don't get the grant, we're not committed to spend this money, right?
That is correct.
Okay, that's all I have.
Great question. Counselor Voorhees.
I had a comment, not a question, so I'll delay, I'll hold my thunder until such time that comments are welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Okay. Just open to public comment. Seeing none, I'll bring it back for comments and/or motion.
I think
Counselor
this is
Voorhees.
terrific. This is a big safety issue. I'm really glad to see this in front of us.
Yeah, thank you. We agree.
You have a brief comment?
Charlie.
I think for the public's sake, I know we just ran through a bunch of agenda items, and I think it may look like we're being flippant about what we're doing, but I wanted to comment, Terry, one of the reasons that I was approving things quickly is I read your reports. I thought they were really well done. I thought they were very descriptive, and I appreciate the brief summary here, but I don't want the public to think that we're just doing things in a flippant way. I think all of us read these packets carefully. I want to thank you for the good work in presenting these reports, because it makes our decision-making easier.
Thank you.
I would say that we also have a lot of trust in you and staff in general that makes it very easy for us to take your staff recommendations and be able to make decisions because we have that trust in you. So,
And having said that, I move for approval.
Wait, I need
Resolution 2020-6.
some more questions.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved by Charlie, seconded by Rick. Any further discussion, Tony?
Just really quick, I had to walk through there, and I was talking to Deborah about that, so I think this is a great idea. It's sort of, I didn't realize what a major connection it is. Like, if you're walking from Devereaux, there is no way to get to here, to this building. You can't cross that street over the bridge over, pedestrians can't cross that bridge over the highway. So this is important, so I'm going to support this. Thank you. What?
It's fantastic. All right, let's call the question.
Stink eye.
I just wanted to have a quick comment. Everyone else has.
Hershey, yes. Step, yes. Davis, yes. Goldish,
That's
yes.
free money.
Cope, yes. Burgess, yes. Willman, yes. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
It didn't get,
Terry.
none of us mentioned it, and it didn't get said, so maybe I shouldn't.
Terry Pat.
This is your thing, but there you go. But Steve Beckley, boy, putting in $300,000, I mean, he'll be the majority contributor to this project, and I think that, we need to recognize that publicly as.
Good point, good point.
Here.
But he's a land baron.
Obviously, we're in the pocket of him, so. All right, next item. What is the next item?
Appointments to boards and commissions.
There we go, yeah.
Which one do we want to do first?
My favorite part.
What's your favorite part?
Back at everybody. I thought I'd take them apart and take one out of each one.
Yeah.
First.
But we're not rushing. It's
Leave
just,
the top ones here.
these are
Transportation.
things that we've discussed.
Okay. Go ahead.
No,
You're fine.
I'm just asking why. It's because it's just.
He makes fun of me doing this.
Okay. All right, so the following appointments are made to the boards and commissions based on the recommendations of their, what do you call them?
Council liaisons.
Huh?
Council liaisons?
Council liaisons and alternates. Steve Smith is appointed to the Transportation Commission. There is one seat remaining for an alternate position, so get out in the community and recruit for that position if we so feel it. James Fosnut is appointed to a regular seat on the Parks and Rec Commission. The River Commission has 3 seats available right now. Elise Osengog will fill a regular seat. She's been moved up from alternate to a regular seat.
Assange.
Assange?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I killed that. And the following board members we will now vote on.
Can I give a recommendation, as I was able to interview for the seat?
Yes.
And Steve and I conversed a little bit because we're both representative
Steve.
liaisons to the
Oh,
River
Steve.
Commission. So we're lucky to have 4 applicants for 1 regular seat that's open and the 1 alternate seat if we move Elise up. So do we need to vote on moving her up from the alternate to the regular seat?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think
so
that's a recommendation
that's done.
from.
Chris Treese has been a very valuable member of the commission. He's only served 1 term, so Steve and I both agreed that we would recommend that he be appointed to the regular seat to serve again. And then of the other 3, Ben West, we just appointed to P&Z as an alternate. He's an excellent candidate. Actually, all the candidates were great. I would maybe recommend that Joel Shute be appointed to the alternate, just as a opening up more opportunity to people in the community that are interested in serving. So,
Steve, do you concur?
Yeah.
Concur?
You agree with that, Steve? Is that heard?
I do, yeah. Shelley and I spoke
we
a
can
couple
certainly
of
vote,
times
yeah.
today. So there's 2 people, there's 2 positions we're looking for.
Regular and
Only
alternate.
2,
Yeah.
yeah.
One regular, one alternate, right?
I wrote myself in.
I'm going to look at your ballot.
Secret
Oh, I saw.
vote. Put
I
your head
can't
down
think
and
of a
close
board
your
I'd
eyes.
rather not serve
Pass
on.
that paper
That's
over.
just like a cheese thing or Sherry Floyd thing.
Okay. Ready, Deborah? Yeah. Chris Treese, regular. Joel Shoes, alternate. 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 Chris Treese, regular, and Joel Shoes, alternate.
You want to add this up?
I've having trouble following that. I was having trouble following that vote.
That recommendation went far.
By the way,
For a recount.
I would agree, just in reviewing the applications, I thought that we had some really good applications for that position.
Yeah.
We
That's
did.
one of those commissions that I think is really highly sought after, and it's great we have those people. So I'm sorry we couldn't appoint them all, but I think it.
Right, I do have a comment also after the vote. I took into account Tim Malloy's letter, and I really do think we need to make sure that when these people come before us and take the effort to fill out applications and try to interview with us, that we do everything possible, that we have an exchange with them through an interview and stuff, so that we give a fair look at it in the future.
I agree.
Yeah.
And also, do they get, for you, Deborah's question, do they get a letter of thanks for serving or a letter of thanks for even applying to the boards?
We did send a letter thanking him, yes.
Great, great. Is that kind of our general course?
Think so?
But even applicants that apply, if they don't get appointed at this time, it's nice to have them be open to serving on a future board. And just a small letter of thanks is nice.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think the only thing that we've done so far as a board that we've approved as a whole council is P&Z. So I think in the future, we should try to offer, within reason. I mean, somebody's going to be out for 2 weeks and we need to fill a position. We can't do that. But otherwise, I think the boards and commissions.
And I think I missed it. I thought he just wasn't able to make it or something. And
Yeah, that's true. He wasn't able to make
If
it.
I had known he was unavailable, we could do it at a later time. I would have waited to do that interview. It was probably didn't ask the right question, so my fault, so.
All right. Reports from city administration. Deborah.
I think all I have is I'm off tomorrow, and Steve Boyd will be acting manager.
Thank you, Steve.
Cool. Party.
Have fun.
Just a couple of things. One, I believe we have come to an agreement on a proposed contract, real estate contract with the fire station. Nothing substantive really changed that much from when you guys discussed it in executive session, so I'm just letting you know we bring that back to the next regular meeting for action. So happy about that. I'm going to depress you and then make you feel slightly better. A really interesting conversation about rent control. You don't have the authority to do that underneath the Telluride case in Colorado unless you have an ownership interest in the project. That's the depressing part. The good part is that there is a proposed bill that has not yet been introduced regarding inclusionary zoning, allowing on rent control projects to allow local jurisdictions to do that. I don't believe it's been introduced yet. It's kind of late in the session. We'll see where that goes. But
And
there's a possibility.
I have the language for that bill. I'll send out when I send out my CML report this week. And actually, it's a real brief thing, and I'll send it out.
Yeah, no, that would be great. Telluride has been a case that we have struggled with at the local level for a while, so I'm glad to see the state finally taking some action on it and give us some flexibility. Other than that,
Great.
I don't have anything.
Thanks, Carl.
You know, it came up in the mayor's meeting today about the marijuana delivery, and that we should be considering it, whether we want to take action or not.
Right.
So I would love to find out more about that, either from our CML rep or from you.
No, I certainly can. I've done legislation in a couple of other jurisdictions already. You guys have a lot on your plate.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's an opt-in provision, so it doesn't happen unless you decide it does. I think we can probably have a conversation later in April, just given our schedule getting to there.
Sure.
If that works for you guys.
Yeah.
And
Jonathan,
can I make,
just say, you said the first part of that because you turned the other way.
Excuse me, marijuana delivery?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there were a couple of changes that opened up some other possibilities in the marijuana industry. They are all opt-in provisions in the state statute, so I just figured when we had some time and a reason we could talk about it.
Does that include those marijuana parlor things?
can I make a comment on
Yeah.
that too?
Everybody be sure and vote.
Yes.
Yes.
Can I make a comment on the marijuana things? So Valley Marijuana Council had a call yesterday about that, and they're going to put together maybe some list of recommendations. I believe they talked to our new police chief about it a little bit, and they've got a few concerns about delivery from a law enforcement standpoint, but also from keeping it out of the hands of kids. And also, the other piece is that hospitality piece. We can allow tasting rooms, apparently, or establishments like that, if we want to opt in. So that might be coming too, and that might be good timing for a conversation. They were
Yeah, that was
thinking
kind of
maybe
focused.
April.
All of those things were
Yeah.
going to kind of be, but we haven't, it's so hard, it's been a while since I've talked about marijuana regulations.
Right.
I have to bring it up.
Right.
So, no, there have been a few changes, so it's probably worthwhile to have a little bit of a conversation, and also to the extent that everybody isn't up to speed on what the options are out there, that we talk a little bit about that.
There are two really handy kind of handouts that the state put together. Maybe Deborah, could you send those out to council just for people to look at? I had sent them to you and Carl. Yeah.
And Carl, in California,
On
they
Monday.
started that
Yeah.
delivery and they have
Monday.
those
Not tonight.
marijuana restaurants. Can we go for a field trip?
Deborah, what's the Mountain Family Health Center letter?
That is, remember Rob Stan came and talked to you about a health center in the high school? They're planning on doing presentation in March.
Okay.
Letter says February 20th, but I told them this is probably not the best meeting to do that.
Okay.
It's a long day.
Yep. Yes, it was.
All right.
We don't need the exec session.
We don't?
No, I
we
just took
don't?
care of it.
We just talked about the
We got
fire
nothing on the
station.
27th Street Bridge?
Nothing we're going to talk about tonight, no.
Great.
That was fun.
Carl, one thing, remind me to mention marijuana. Do you know there's a